All right, we should be live. Let's give it a minute until we see if everything is indeed working properly. And if I can see the numbers. Yes, I can see the number now, so we should be all good. Good evening, everyone. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me properly. What an opening shot, yes. So we've got about 10 minutes before to start. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. So we've got 10 minutes to get to know each other. If any of you are watching this on replay in the next few days, you can skip the first 10 minutes to go straight into the tour. Hi Michelle, welcome. If you're wondering whether you're watching a live or a replay, well, today it is 16th of June. It is nearly 9 p.m. UK time. So if it's no longer 16th of June when you're watching this, then you're probably watching a replay. Nice to see you here, Natasha. You can hear me well. Perfect. Thanks, Alice. You love to pop in early to hang out. That's what I like to do, just so we get a bit of time to chat and then everyone has time to connect. Let me show you the view again before the sun goes. So as you can probably tell, those are the Houses of Parliament. You've got the Elizabeth Tower to the right, aka Big Ben, although it's not really its name, and the Victoria Tower on the other side. And Caroline is here. Welcome, Caroline. Nice to see you here. Hi, Lethargy. Nice to see you here as well. And on this side here, it is Lambeth Bridge. Lambeth is painted in red because of the Houses of Parliament divided into two sections. So on this side, it's the House of Lords, where the seats are red. And on the other side, it's the House of Commons, where they are green. So the Westminster Bridge down there is painted in green. It's half-time, and England is winning. Perfect. Thanks for the heads up, William. So hope you can stay with us through half-time. Then you might have to get back to football. But that's cool. You can catch the replay later on to see what you've missed. Yes, Natasha, I did see Back to Black about a month ago now. Yeah, great movie. They did a good job, really. At least a good job portraying Amy. For the ones that don't know, Back to Black is a movie about Amy Winehouse. The lady on the monument there, this is Violette Szabo. She was a secret operation executive through the Second World War, a spy. I did a little short about her. So if you want to hear about a minute of her life, you can check my shorts. And let me check what time it is. We've got 6 minutes before to start. 6 minutes before it's officially time to start. And Rose is here. Welcome, Rose. So I think quite a few of you have seen this tour before, but we've not done it in about 10 months. So hopefully you had time to forget everything. Oh, you couldn't stop crying after the movie? Well, that's good. That signifies it's a good movie with good acting. So we've got a very decent weather today, but it's not actually warm. It's it's end of June and mid-June, and I'm still wearing a little jacket. Hi Pam from Toronto, Canada. Our serial killer tonight is actually from Canada. Well, no, I'm lying. He's actually from Glasgow, but he grew up in Canada. Hi Pauline, nice to see you here. How can you ever forget Dr. Cream? Well, he probably wouldn't have wanted to be forgotten. That's what they want. They want to be infamous. So in a way, I'm helping them. Oh, thank you, Natasha. Let me check what time it is. 4 minutes to go. 4 minutes. So we are in Lambeth. We're just across the river from Westminster, but this area is called Lambeth. And the tide is high at the moment. The river Thames is tidal. It goes in and out following the sea levels. At the moment the tide is in. And Emma is here. Welcome, Herbivore. So we've got just a few minutes to go. Three minutes. Yeah, usually Sundays are quite good because a lot of people are available to watch on a Sunday. Well, not everyone. Some people have to work, but it's cool. Now with YouTube, you can catch the replays anyway. Oh, you've just virtually been to Berlin. That's cool. Let me show you the view again because the light is changing and you might be getting bored of my face anyway. You're on the couch with a tea. Perfect timing, yeah. That sounds quite right. Hi Mark, nice seeing you here. Welcome. So we've got a couple of minutes before to start. So it is nearly 9 p.m. in London. It's the best part of the year when you still have light at 9 p.m. Never get bored of my face. Oh, I'm sure you would, Tish. I don't know how long it would take, but I'm sure you would. Great shot, yeah, it's a nice angle. Let me show you the London Eye. I have to be careful not to drop the phone, but see the tower. It looks like a tower from here because we're actually right on its side, but it's actually the London Eye. It's the big wheel to my right. The London Eye was built to celebrate the millennium. Originally it was meant to last only 5 years, but it's such a fortune wheel that we decided to keep it anyway. You saw Taylor Swift drag queen yesterday. That must have been fun. I'm very glad to have you again, Mark. Oh, we can hear Big Ben shining, so it should be time to go. Ooh, 1 minute. It's 1 minute early, Big Ben. It's meant to be one of the most precise clocks in the country, but it's a bit, unless it's my phone that's not on time, who knows. Can you hear Big Ben? I don't know how much you can hear with the microphone. So in this case, I'm allowed to say Big Ben, because Big Ben is actually the name of the bell inside. Right, let me check. Yes, it is officially time to start. Thank you, Big Ben. Right, so welcome everyone. If any of you were completely new to me, you're very welcome. I'm Natalie, so I'll take you for a live walk. You've got the chat, feel free to use it. Ask me any questions you might have, or feel free to chat between yourselves. Don't be shy. Honestly, it is my job to know how much to interact with the chat and when to ignore it when needs be. So don't be shy. And Tariq is here with the bears, I hope. Welcome. So let's go. Let's flip this camera around. So tonight we'll talk about an interesting serial killer known as Thomas Neill Cream. Now, we talked about quite a few serial killers or killers in my tours before, but I wanted to start the tour here. Well, first because I wanted to start with a view, but also because, you know, if we were to compare to, let's say, Jack the Ripper operated in the dark little alleyways of Whitechapel. Thomas Neill Cream operated right here. Across the river, of course, that's Parliament. Right next to Big Ben, you've got Scotland Yard, so that's the head office of the police. So really, Cream operated right under the noses of the authorities, really. He used to live just down that road. He used to live at 103 Lambeth Palace Road. We're not going to go because there's nothing to see today. It's been bombed through the Blitz. But that's why I wanted to start here. Now, Thomas Neill Cream was actually born in Glasgow, but then his family immigrated to Quebec. They were into import of timber, so they would sell timber from Canada to the UK, and his family made a lot of money. So he was born quite a rich little boy, and his dad would let him do whatever he wanted. So his dad was not any strict with him at all. And he decided to study medicine. He studied in Montreal at McGill University, one of the best schools of medicine at the time and in the country. And at the time, so at McGill at the time, they would have been dissecting a lot of cadavers that might have been stolen. We spoke about that in some of my tours before, about body snatchers. You know, there was a massive demand for human bodies. And in the UK it had pretty much stopped. Not completely, but in 1832 we had an Act of Parliament that stated that everyone dying in the workhouses or in the prisons, their bodies would be given to science. So that nearly stopped the problem of the body snatchers. In Canada, it was not the case. So at the time when Cream was in uni, so in the 1860s really, they would have still been dissecting stolen cadavers. I'm not telling you that Thomas Neill Cream himself would have been body snatching, but some of his colleagues and some of his friends at school would have. Actually, there's an interesting story about McGill Uni. Apologies, I was not able to double check the story because I read it months ago, and at the time I didn't really think I would be doing any tours in Canada anytime soon, so I didn't really take notice. But yeah, I read one story. Apparently in the 19th century there were some students planning a dissection at McGill. One of them had been stealing a body in a cemetery. And the last one was a bit late. He had a rough week because he had been burying his aunt. So he was running a bit late. They were waiting for him. I don't remember his name, so let's call him Jack. So they're waiting for Jack to arrive. They already have the body there on the dissecting table. And one of them was like, oh, crap, this is Jack's aunt. you've stolen Jack's aunt's body. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Because he's coming in a minute. And eventually they decided to dissect, to skin her head. So they literally skinned the face. So when Jack entered the room, he did not recognize his aunt. So apparently he dissected his own aunt. Blah. Anyway, back to Cream. That's where he studied, and he was already a bit dodgy as a student. In his student room, he had taken an insurance policy because he had a lot of expensive items of clothing. And one day, his little student bedroom was set on fire. When the insurance came for the claim, they found a skeleton in the bed. And they very quickly understood that the skeleton was actually from the dissection. It was actually, those skeletons they would use to study. Did he try to fake his own death? Probably. And he definitely cheated the insurance. They refused to pay. I mean, they paid, but nothing near like what he was asking. And so yeah, already a bit dodgy at the time. Now, while we're here, a little pause in the story. This is Lambeth Palace. It is the location where the Archbishop of Canterbury lives in London. So the Archbishop of Canterbury is the big boss in terms of religion in the Church of England. So that's where he lives, and it's a Tudor building, so it dates back to the time of Henry VIII. And guess what? It is haunted. They have a couple of ghosts. One of them is an interesting ghost because he's actually saving lives. Well, at least one life. Apparently there's one tower inside where in a specific room sometimes people get locked. They would refuse, someone's blocking the door. Matthew is asking, is Captain Blight in that church? So I'm guessing you mean St. Mary's next door. Maybe, not that I know of, but maybe, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, there's one particular room where people get stuck, apparently. It's like some supernatural force is keeping the door closed. Well, if that indeed is a ghost, he saved a life. Through World War II, there was a man that was up there, and he was planning to go into a different part of the building when he couldn't get out. The door was locked. There was nothing wrong with the lock. He just couldn't push the door. And he knew about the ghost. He had been told before that sometimes you get stuck in there. So he didn't panic. He just waited in there. He thought in a moment, someone would be able to hear him scream and they'll come and help him. An hour later, he tried again and he was able to push the door. So he just came out like if nothing happened. Well, guess what? The part of the building that he was planning to reach had actually been bombed through that very hour when he was stuck in there. So the ghost actually saved his life. Some say that the building is also haunted by the ghost of Anne Boleyn. Personally, I actually doubt it. There's no evidence that Anne Boleyn ever came here. Some say that some of the religious authorities that concluded that a marriage should be void and she should be executed. Some say that some of it happened here, but apparently there's no evidence of that. So I don't see why she should be hanging around and hunting the building, but why not? Anyway, this beautiful little graveyard, it's actually a museum today. It is the Garden Museum. So the church is no longer consecrated, it's a museum. It's an interesting one. Well, I've not actually been. It's £15 to get in, and I'm not a big gardener myself. And one of the graves actually is said to have a ghost as well. Apparently, there's a little funky story. It's the grave of a gardener. His name was John. Well, it's actually two of them, John the father and John the son, the trade sons they're called. And apparently, if you go around the grave at midnight when Big Ben shine, you run and you dance around the grave. The ghost comes out. It's a nice little story, but the grave is from the 17th century. Big Ben was really not there yet, so I kind of doubt the story. But yeah, hey ho. Oh, you've been in there, Tariq? Yeah, it's to be honest, I wanted to go just to see the grave, but it's a bit expensive for a tiny little museum. Well, I said that I have not been. It might be amazing, but yeah. One day I'll go. Anyway, let's get back to Cream. So he's studying in Canada, and he actually met a girl in Waterloo next to Montreal, not Waterloo here. Her name was Flora. She's 16 years old when they dated, and she quickly got pregnant. Now, we spoke about that before. You know, in Victorian times, getting pregnant out of wedlocks, it was absolutely horrible for them. They'd lose all their prospect of marriage, career. They'd be a loose woman, a fallen woman. So they would do anything to avoid that. There's a little thing to exchange your books here. It's quite cool. So Flora and Neill agreed that that he'd give her an illegal abortion. Hi Kurt, not seen you in a while. And so they did that. It worked. I mean, she did not have the baby, but she caught an infection and she never fully recovered. So she had to tell her dad. Her dad went ballistic, and he actually forced Cream to marry her. Not only did he force him to marry her, but he also forced him to sign a marriage contract in which Cream was signing that if he ever divorced her, he would have to give her a massive amount of money in the divorce settlement, a ridiculous amount of money. So Cream actually married Flora, and the next day he was off. He was off to London to study here in St. Thomas's Hospital. Just 200 yards down the road, you've got St. Thomas's Hospital. He actually failed from St. Thomas, so he went to finish his study in Edinburgh University. And Flora never fully recovered. She was very unwell. Thomas was actually sending her some pills to make her feel better. She got a few wrong diagnoses, and she died. At the time, there were not much suspicions around the death, but with what we know now about Cream, we know that he probably murdered her miles away. He probably sent her poison in those little capsules. So that's very sad. And after that, he graduated from Edinburgh University, came back to Canada, where he settled in London, Ontario. He opened a medical practice there. And in London, Ontario, he had a bad rep. At that time, he was a respectable doctor, but at night, he used to get wasted on really high on opium and stuff. So he was a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, really. And gotta wait because it's a bit noisy. And in London, Ontario, there's a lady that found herself. Well, she didn't find herself. She was found dead right behind this medical practice. She was, her name was Catherine Gardner. She was a young lady that happened to be pregnant. Now, because of the location of the dead body right next to Cream's medical practice, he was interrogated by the police, and he said, yes, I know her. I knew Catherine Gardner. She was a patient of mine. She came asking for an abortion, which is illegal, of course. I'll never do that. So I said no. She probably ran off and committed suicide. Now, it would have been possible. She was killed with chloroform. But when they looked at the extent of the injuries by her nose had been a bit burned by the chloroform. They believed that she wouldn't have had the physical strength to keep the tissue with the poison that close to her nose for that long, because she would have been passing out, so her muscles would have relaxed and she couldn't do that to herself. They also interrogated her flatmate. She had a flatmate, and they said that she was having an affair with the doctor, with Thomas Neill Cream. And thank you, Comington. And he got her pregnant, and she told him she wanted an abortion, and he said, oh no, just find someone in the newspaper, someone famous, anyone, send them a letter accusing them of being the father, they'll give you money. So he literally told her to blackmail somebody into pretending they were the father. She didn't do it. Well, she didn't have time to do it anyway because she was found dead. Now, the police didn't have enough to incriminate him, but everyone in London, Ontario believed him to be guilty, so he had to leave. He actually left Canada and he moved to Chicago. In Chicago, there was a lot of prostitution at the time, so there was also a lot of demand for illegal abortions. We're pretty sure that he was performing illegal abortions at the time. There were a few ladies actually that were found dead at that point in Chicago. The police never really had enough to incriminate him. Well, with one of them, to be fair, they could have. He managed, so there's a lady that was found dead in his medical practice. He managed to accuse his midwife. He had a midwife that was a working class black lady called Hattie Mack. He managed to accuse her. She was actually convicted. But you know, at the time, he was an upper class, educated man, white man, against a poor black lady. Would you think that the jury were gonna believe? So yeah, very, very sad. There was a second one that was found dead as well. This building, by the way, would have already been there at the time of Thomas Neill Cream. It used to be a school. It is meant to be haunted by the ghost of the headmistress that died in the building. It's back to being a school now. It belonged to the museum for a little while, and now it's a school for kids with difficulties, with special needs. Anyway, back to Cream. The police didn't have much yet to convict him until another murder, a gentleman this time, Daniel Stott. Daniel suffered from epilepsy, and he had a beautiful girlfriend. It turned up that Neill and Stott's girlfriend started an affair. And Neill was giving prescriptions to Stott to cure or to relieve his epilepsy. Stott died. He was buried. They didn't think anything suspicious was happening there. He was buried. But Cream he was not satisfied with the idea of getting away with murder. So would you believe he sent a letter to the coroner? He told the coroner that death is very suspicious. I suspect strychnine poisoning. You'd have to exhume the body and check. The coroner didn't think there was anything suspicious, no reason to suspect foul play. He didn't do anything. Cream insisted. He sent another letter telling the coroner, you should double check. You should exhume the body. If you don't believe me, take the leftover medicine and give it to a dog. See what happens. Eventually the coroner was like, okay, let's do that. So they found the medicine, they found an innocent dog, they gave him the medicine, the dog died. So they exhumed Thomas Todd's body and they found traces of strychnine poisoning. Now, Cream had already incriminated himself too much. He could have got away with murder once more time, but no. He then tried to accuse the pharmacist, and eventually that was a bit too much, so they convicted him. He went down for murder. He was sent to Juliet Prison in Illinois. Now, at the time, you know, one murder, that was enough. That should have been capital punishment, or maybe because he was a doctor, because it could have been an accident, prison for life. But he should not have been released ever. We believe that they might have bribed people. He eventually got out 9 years later. And at the time, you know, there were hardly any forensic. If we did, that would have been very different. Talking about forensics, across the street there, this is the London Forensics Police head office. That's where you might have seen a few police cars along the way. Every time I cycle past, I wonder what amazing cases they might be working on right now. And you know, at the time, so when he came out of prison, what they would have done to him before he went, they would have done what they called bertillonnage. Bertillonnage, it sounds very French, it is. It's a technique that was created by Alphonse Bertillon. Bertillon is the guy that invented the mugshot. The mugshots were quite convenient. Usually in Victorian times with the mugshots, they used to actually have your hands on the portrait as well, because a lot of people were missing fingers and stuff, so that was easy to use, to recognize them. But the mugshots, they were classified by names. And it was so easy at the time to change your name that you know, they could get lost. So Bertillon created a series of measurements, 11 measurements of your body. It might be the forearm, it might be the diameter of your skull, 11 different measurements, because it's very unlikely that different people would have exactly the same 11 measurements. And those measurements would be classified by measurement. So that was a good system. We are, to give you an idea, about 10 years before fingerprints. So that was the most elaborated thing at the time. Still on the Jack the Ripper case. Well, yeah, we're literally just after Jack the Ripper. To give you an idea, we are in 1891. Some people believe that Cream was Jack the Ripper, but we'll talk about that in a moment. It's really not possible because at that time he was in Juliet Prison, so he was locked in. There was no way he could have been Jack the Ripper, and also it's a very different MO. Anyway, when he was released from prison, his family had some serious doubts about his sanity. They believed he was losing it, so they sent him to London. Why not? Like, if it was gonna help. And when he arrived in London, he moved here in Lambeth, and the murders started very, very soon after. The first lady was called Ellen Darnworth. She was a 19-year-old lady that had just moved into London with her boyfriend from the countryside. She had fallen into hard times. She ended up selling her body. She first moved to London because she got pregnant at the age of 16, so her family didn't want anything to do with her anymore. She came here because she had a job in Lambeth, in a factory. She was sticking labels on bottles, but she lost that job and her baby died. And her boyfriend couldn't find any work either, so that's how she fell into prostitution. And sadly, her boyfriend was actually living on the proceeds of her sex work. And one night, she was soliciting in front of the Wellington Arm in Waterloo. We'll go there in a few days. On Thursdays, we're going there. And she was waiting for customers, and very suddenly she felt very unwell. She fell on the ground. There was a police constable that was nearby that went to assist. He was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" She was really not okay. She said, "I need to go home." So the police constable called a hackney cab, those horse carriages, to take her home. She had time to tell the police officer, it is the gentleman with the cross eye. It is him. He gave me a drink with some white powder. It's the gentleman with the cross eye. It's him. And she actually died in the horse carriage before to make it home. Now there was of course an inquest. The police concluded that she had taken her own life. There were evidence of strychnine poisoning in her body, but because she was so-called unfortunate, because she had lost her baby, because she ended up selling her body, they concluded that she must have taken the poison herself. Now, it is possible, but why would she make up a story of a cross-eyed man? And how would she get the strychnine? That was a poison for doctors, that was not... Sorry, it's a bit noisy, there's a train above me. It wasn't something you'd get at the pharmacy if you were not a doctor. It was used as a rat poison, but it was also used in some kind of prescription on very, very tiny quantities. And the police did not completely drop the case, to be fair. Sorry, I'm just looking at. This looks like a stink pipe. I never noticed it before, but I think it's an old stink pipe. Across the street. So they were those things for the Victorian public sewer for the gas to come out. Anyway, so Cream got away with that one. The police did arrest some guy that was bragging in a pub in King's Cross about poisoning, but it turned up to be innocent, and that was it. They didn't have much else to go on. And one night, literally 2 weeks later, so Cream didn't wait long, right here at the corner of Hercules Street, you had two ladies. The buildings are very different today, but it would have been a home on this site. Two ladies, sex workers as well. They had been booked by a gentleman, a doctor called Fred. He was a doctor, he wore a top hat, and he was a bit cross-eyed. Let me show you Fred's photograph. It is, of course, we know now, Thomas Neill Cream. He went with the name of Fred when he was meeting his ladies of the night. Now, the two girls were waiting for him. They had been booked, the both of them, to spend a couple of hours with him. And they were astonished to see Fred through the window right here. He was talking to another lady. Yeah, William Blake lived on this street, yeah. He was talking to another lady called Matilda Clover. And they were like, what? He's booked us and he's not even coming to us. So they watched him through the window. He was with Matilda and they walked along that way. Matilda was a 27 years old. She was also a sex worker. She was living across the street there with her 2 years old that she was struggling to feed. She lived in an accommodation with another lady. She was a lodger. The lady had a maid called Lucy Rose, and Matilda was her face had been ravaged by smallpox. So she took Fred home, and then so the maid Lucy Rose, she had time to meet him just a couple of minutes, and then Matilda went down to the pub. I'll show you the pub in a moment. She went to buy a bit of beer. Nowadays we go down to the shop, but at the time you'd go down to the pub, you'd buy the drinks to take away. The pub is still here today. It's closed, but it's still here. I'll show you. So she went back upstairs with Cream. They did what they had to do. They were alone in a room. We don't know what they did. And eventually Fred left. And a couple of minutes later, Lucy Rose, the maid, came back into the bedroom, and Matilda told Lucy Rose that Fred had given her 2 pills to avoid catching the disease. When they say the disease, we're talking about venereal disease. At the time, the sex workers were very, very scared because a good 15 to 20% of the population had syphilis at the time. And then half an hour later, sorry, when I said the people had syphilis, the bicycle, he went like, oh, I don't know if he was reacting to me or not, but it was funny. So he had gone when Matilda started feeling very unwell. Her body started shaking and convulsing. She had those kind of titanic contractions of the muscles. Strychnine poisoning is very violent. It's extremely violent as a way to go. All your muscles are contracting, completely out of your control. You very much fully conscious until the end of until you cannot breathe anymore. So a terrible way to go. A doctor was called, but the doctor was too busy. He couldn't come, so he sent his assistant. The assistant came up. Matilda is still alive, and he said, "Yeah, she doesn't have long to live. This is epilepsy due to alcohol poisoning. Nothing we can do. I'll try to bring some medicine, but she's gonna go," basically. Now, it is true that Matilda had a problem with alcohol, and she died. She died very soon after. The doctor actually came the next morning. It's a very different building, but this is the site where she would have lived. The doctor came the next morning, and he didn't really care about examining the body. He just went on with the conclusion of his colleague. He said, "Okay, yes, that's epilepsy due to alcohol poisoning. I'll give you the death certificate." And Lucy Rose, the maid, she tried to say, but she took some pills from Fred. She said she took some pills. The doctor didn't really care. He didn't listen. They did the death certificate. She was buried in Tooting Cemetery, and that was it. And at that point, they didn't see anything suspicious about the death. So the coroner was not involved. That was it. That was done and dusted. Then a few days later, Thomas Neill Cream meets another lady, another sex worker, Lou Harvey, or Louisa Harvey. She spent the night with him in some kind of a hotel. In the morning, he gave her £3. That was a lot of money at the time. £3, to give you an idea, that's about what a luxurious sex worker would make in a week. So he was very generous. This is the pub, by the way. It's no longer a pub today, but it used to be called the Mason Arms. So that's where she came down to buy the drinks. Anyway, so he spent the night with Lou Harvey. In the morning, he said to her, "Oh, you've got a couple of spots on your forehead. Huh. Well, I'll see you tonight anyway. I'll give you a couple of pills to help with your complexion." Now, I know it sounds ridiculous to us today to accept pills out of a stranger, but back in the day, those ladies, they were confronted to a gentleman from high society, a guy with a top hat, a silk hat. At the time, most people would most men would have a boiler hat. To have a top hat, it was a sign of great rank in society, And I'm not sure what dance you're talking about, Tish. So yeah, you trust them, Lou didn't though. So they agreed to meet on the embankment that very night. So they met, but she actually had her brother following her because she didn't completely trust her very dangerous, I was going to say, a very generous customer. And on the embankment, Neil came to meet her, and He actually gave her the 2 pills for her skin, you know. Wow, is that a dance? The Lambeth walk? Never heard of that dance. Tish. So he gave her the pills, and she actually managed to pretend to take them when she actually didn't. So he was like, show me your hands. She showed her hands, they were emptied. He believed she had taken them. And then he suddenly pretended that he had to go somewhere. He had to go back to St. Thomas's Hospital to do something. So he said to her, you go to the theater, I'll meet you at the exit. Of course, he never showed, because he thought she was dead. He was convinced she had taken the pills, and he was convinced he had killed her. And that was it, you know. The pub was renamed. I just don't know what dance we're talking about. And anyway, so he went on, and actually at that point he went back to Canada for a little while. He ran out of money, so he had to go back to Canada to collect the rest of his inheritance. So he went on a ship. On a ship, he actually met a police officer from Canada, and he talked about having some information about murders. He talked about strychnine. He talked about poisoning. He kind of incriminated himself, but the police officer didn't trust the guy. He didn't believe him. He thought the guy was just high on morphine and was talking rubbish. And when he came back, that's when a lot of people started to receive a lot of oh, thanks, Kurt. I didn't know about the musical. I don't know if it has anything to do with it. So yeah, when he comes back from Canada, that's when a lot of people started to receive letters, very odd letters. William Fred Smith, he was the son of W.H. Smith. You know, if you are from the UK, you might know the stationery and a bookseller. You know, when you go into the train station, you often have a W.H. Smith. He was a member of parliament, and his son and heir had to be, he was in the press a lot. He received a letter saying, I know you've been involved in the poisoning of Ellen Donworth. I have some evidence of that. You give me that amount of money or I'll tell the police. Now, William Fred Smith had nothing against him, so he actually told the police about the letter. The police did catch they took the letter. They tried to set up a trap against the blackmailer, but he didn't show up. So they left it as it is. Then there was a magistrate, also called Smith, that received a similar letter accusing William Fred Smith of murdering Ellen Donworth. The magistrate didn't take it seriously, didn't do anything with the letter. Then there was a physician, William Broadbent. He was a doctor, he was the physician of Queen Victoria. He also received a letter accusing him of murdering a Matilda Clover with strychnine. Now that was a big mistake on Cream's side, because the police didn't know about any Matilda Clover being murdered yet. The police they did take the letter, they did file it, but they were taken to different police stations, so they were not connected quite yet. Eventually, there's another lady, Countess Russell. She also received a letter. She was staying at the Savoy. The Countess was going through a very public divorce. And the letter she received told her that her husband, Count Russell, had been involved into a murder. Matilda Clover at number 27 South Lambeth Road. Now the Countess was actually curious because, well, if her husband had indeed been involved into a poisoning case, she could use it in the divorce. So she sent her coachman to number 27 South Lambeth Road. So he knocked at the door and he asked if they knew about any Matilda Clover being murdered. They didn't, because Cream had made a mistake. We are not at number 27 South Lambeth Road. We were at number 27 Lambeth Road. So he'd made a mistake. So the Countess also dropped the case. She did give the letter to the police eventually, but that took a while, and that didn't develop quite yet. And eventually the case really became very much public after a double murder, a double event at number 118 Stamford Street. It's just a few streets away. It's in Waterloo. A police constable was on patrol where he walked in front of number 118 and he spotted a gentleman coming out. The gentleman was wearing a top hat and gold-rimmed glasses, and he looked a bit too posh for Lambeth, really. Just a little bit too wealthy for this area. At the time, Lambeth could really rival with Whitechapel in terms of vice and prostitution. Waterloo was called Horaloo at the time. So the guy was just a bit too posh, so the police constable took notice of it. 45 minutes later, the same police constable comes back, and coming out of the very same building, another police officer had a lady on his back, and he said to his colleague, "Go in, there's another one in, go inside, there's another one." So the police constable went inside. There was indeed another lady. The two ladies were in a terrible state. One of them was already dead, Alice Mash. They were 19 and 20 years old. Emma Shrivel was still alive for a few minutes. She said to the police officer, it's Fred. Check into the bedroom, we've got some letters from Fred. He's given us some pills against the disease. It's Fred. And she actually died before to get into hospital. They tried to empty her stomach, but that didn't help. In the autopsy, they found traces of strychnine. Now, the police constable that has seen the gentleman, he was convinced it was him, and he actually had time to ask Emma Shrivel, was it Fred? Is the gentleman that came out of the building 45 minutes earlier with a top hat on gold-rimmed glasses, was it Fred? And she said, yes, it's Fred. So the police constable was convinced that he had seen the murderer and that he could recognize him. So he actually walked around town every night, around the theaters and stuff. He was convinced he could find the guy. Meanwhile, the police investigated. They actually looked into a can of salmon because the girls had eaten some salmon before. It sounds a bit ridiculous, but there had been a few cases of salmon poisoning from cans at the time. Even the Navy, they had stopped giving salmon to their soldiers. And eventually one day, that very police officer spotted Cream. He spotted the guy outside of a theater in the West End. He followed him home across Westminster Bridge, and he actually he had an address, 103 Lambeth Palace Road. Sorry. So he knew where the guy lived. So he found the name, a so-called Thomas Neill Cream. So they started to investigate him, and they followed him around, and actually Cream complained. He filed a complaint against the police because they were harassing him. And the police officers, they've been very smart on this one. They actually, they paid the police officer to become his friend, pretending to be investigating the harassment, and they actually did become friends. They went to a pub, and Cream definitely knew way too much about poisoning, about strychnine, about a Matilda Clover being murdered, as well as a Louisa Harvey being murdered. The police didn't know about any Lou Harvey. And that police officer had a pub, the Crown and Caution. We'll actually see that pub on Thursday. He managed to get a sample of Cream's handwriting. So then the police they had enough to convict him of blackmailing, but they didn't quite have enough for the murders yet. Although they knew it was him, how would he know about the murder of Matilda Clover? They then exhumed the body. She had been buried, 14 caskets were on top of hers, but she was indeed poisoned with strychnine. So how would the blackmailer knew about the murder unless he was indeed the murderer? So, and then they sent a police officer to America at that point to investigate his past. Oh God, that police officer was in for a treat, because then they uncovered all the other murders in America. But still, they didn't quite have enough to convict him until Lou Harvey. She was very much still alive. She had married and she had moved to Brighton, so she had a new name. But she read in the newspaper that there was a Lou Harvey that was murdered outside of a theatre in London because she had swallowed 2 elongated pills. Then she was like, this sounds like me. This is me. And a couple of days later, she read again the very same thing in the newspaper. So she contacted the police and she was like, I think you're talking about me. I'm not dead. I'm very much alive. But I was indeed given 2 elongated pills. And the day of the trial, she actually turned up in court as a witness. Apparently, Cream went blank. He believed he had seen a ghost because he was convinced he had killed her, of course. And that was such a strong case now because she was such a good witness. You know, she had been given the pills. By that time, the police had found the suppliers, a pharmacist right next to Scotland Yard, actually. So they had enough. They had enough to convict him of murder. One case of murder was enough to be hanged at the time. So he was hanged at Newgate Prison. And apparently when he went for the gallows, he had a rope around his neck. And when they dropped it, he went, I am Jack. Take that story with a pinch of salt, because the story of I am Jack actually came out only 10 years later. So some have assumed that he meant I am Jack the Ripper, which is not exactly possible, of course, because he would have been locked in Juliet prison at the time. But that's why he's now on the list of the many, many suspects. Some believe that maybe he had a twin brother or someone that was locked in for him, and that he was in Whitechapel killing those prostitutes. It's very, very unlikely. And some say that he never said, I am Jack. Some say that he might have tried to say, I am ejaculating. We will never know. I mean, we do know that it does happen. Ejaculation when people get hanged, but who knows? Anyway, that was the story of Thomas Neill Cream for you. Let me flip this camera around. So this beautiful building, it is the Imperial War Museum. It is, oh, you're a bit late? Don't worry, Linda. That's absolutely fine. The Imperial War Museum, it is now a free museum about, World War II mainly. Great museum, but it's not, who would think to narrate while dying? I don't know. I do hope he's not Jack the Ripper, though, because his remains are now right next to Catherine Eddowes and Polly Nichols. He had been buried originally underground at Newgate Prison, but when they destroyed the prison, they removed all those remains and they reburied them at the City of London Cemetery in Manor House. So he's buried now fairly close to 2 of the Jack the Ripper victims. Well, even 3, because Annie Chapman is not far either. Anyway, so the museum, it used to be the site of the Bethlehem Hospital, aka Bedlam. You might have heard the expression when we say, oh, it's Bedlam in here, when it's chaotic. It is because of the hospital. So we actually had 4 different sites. The Bedlam Hospital moved a few times. It started in the 13th century in a priory. The most infamous of the Bedlam sites was actually the one before this one in Moorgate. It was a beautiful building. It was often compared to Versailles, and it was managed as a charity. Although the governor of the establishment was a gentleman from high society, and they never really had an inspection because of that until 1814, and apparently inside it was absolutely horrendous. The money, the charity money, went straight into his pocket. Some of those inmates, or patients, I should say, but they were really treated like even worse than in prison. Some of them were locked in and chained and naked on the floor with maybe a duvet or something in their own feces and everything. And people used to go and visit Bedlam. They went like if it was a zoo, really. If you read Samuel Pepys' diaries, there's an episode where his little cousin or his little nephew is coming to visit London, and he's like, oh, where should I take him? I think I'll take him to Bedlam, like if he was talking about going to the London Zoo or to the Tower of London or something. So it was really an attraction to go and see what they would have called at the time the mads. They were really treating them like animals in a zoo. Some might argue that actually for those people that were locked in with no contact with the outside world, that it kind of bring them back in touch with society to have a few visits. Well, maybe. And some of those prisoners were very famous. The most famous one was Margaret Nicholson. She had been locked in after trying to kill the king, George III. He was attacked in front of the palace. Margaret had a knife and she tried to stab him. She was stopped by the guards. And very famously, the king said, "This woman is mad. Do not hurt her." Which is quite nice because, of course, we know that a few years later, the king himself, George III, developed some very strong mental health issues himself. You might have seen the movie, of course, the Madness of King George. And Margaret Nicholson, apparently she's portrayed in the movie. I think I've not actually seen that movie. I really should. Anyway, she was very famous. Or infamous, I should say. People would go into Bedlam. They wanted to see Margaret Nicholson. Some of the pubs next door, they used to pretend they had the fork that went with the knife that was used to attack the king. They made wax figures of her and stuff. So she became some kind of an attraction. There was another prisoner that became a bit infamous as well. His name was James Norris. He was an American sailor. He had been locked in at Bedlam. We don't really know why. But when finally they had an inspection in 1814, just before to move here, he was found in a cell, naked, locked in, tied in, chained, and he was perfectly coherent. He was absolutely sane. To be fair, he might have had some mental health issues when he was locked in 9 years earlier, but they didn't check on their patient. They didn't check on their condition, if they got any better or anything. He was released, but sadly he was... He died. He died fairly soon after that because of the very poor conditions in which he had been kept. They also had an apothecary that his name was John White. He used to hang around the ladies' part at night. And when they died, he often, apparently in the basement, he was dissecting their heads, opening their skulls. Well, quite bad. The Bedlam Hospital still exists today. They've moved. They're now in, I think they're in Eltham, South East London. Nowadays, it's a very respectable institution. They would call it the Bethlehem Hospital. Well, some people might still call it Bedlam, but yeah. And but even when it was here, it was better. But people still came to visit the mad, like Charles Dickens used to come here. So how late are you, Linda? You're very late, but you're coming right on time for us to talk about another gentleman, Charlie Chaplin. So you've missed a lot, but you still have a bit. Now, we are in Lambeth, and that's where Charlie Chaplin used to live. Charlie Chaplin, people tend to forget that he's actually a Brit, but yeah, he's from here in South London. His childhood story is a bit of a a bit of a Oliver Twist story, to be honest. Very, very sad. His dad was also a performer, an actor, but he had a problem with alcohol. His dad was Charles Chaplin as well, senior. And his mother, Hannah, she was a singer, but she struggled with her mental health. There's a famous story that probably, I mean, it must be true because it comes across in a few of the sources. One day, well, his dad, their dad left them quite early. Well, his dad, because they were not. What happened with the dad, Charles Senior, he actually left. He went to America, and when he came back a year later, his wife had given birth to another boy, Sidney, that was clearly not his. So that's when Charles Senior abandoned his family. And Anna alone was really struggling to feed the kids. And one day, when Charlie was about 5, 6, 7, we're not too sure, his mother, Anna, is meant to sing on stage. When she had a bit of an episode, her voice cracked, and then she had a bit of a mental health breakdown. And apparently the promoter of the show was like, "You boy," to little Charlie that was there. "You boy, I don't care what you do, but you jump on. You get on stage and you entertain him. You do whatever you want, I don't care what you do, but you get on." So apparently tiny little Charlie jumped on stage and he started dancing and singing. And he made them laugh. He started to imitate his mother with the voice cracking and the breakdown. And they loved him. They absolutely loved him. And that was, it is said, the beginning of his career. As a teenager, he did a sketch group with his brother, Sidney, and he was cast into a play about, the first play about Sherlock Holmes. And that's his career went great ever since after that. He then immigrated to Hollywood. Hollywood at the time was just a tiny village where people went for fame and money. But that was very new. I mean, Hollywood was like 10 years old, really, when Charlie arrived. And of course, he became a genius in his art. He became the best paid actor in the world, and arguably, I would say, the most famous person in the world at the time, or the most famous artist at least. You know, still today, I think you could go to Indonesia or you could go to the Philippines and get out a portrait of Charlie Chaplin. Most people would know who he is. I think somehow, because there's no talking in the early movies, it still resonates with us today. Somehow, you know, it's a bit like Mr. Bean, really. It still somehow still works. So, in terms of his career, great artist. In terms of his love life, well, not really, but we'll talk about that, in a sec. So we're heading into West Square. We believe that Charlie lived there at some point as a child. West Square was designed and built up at the beginning of the 19th century, mainly for people working in the hospital and stuff. And Charlie did write his autobiography, and apparently he remembers living somewhere here for a little while. There's no blue plaque or anything because they're not actually sure of the address, but I'll show you the one it might have been. Now, on the other side of West Square, there was actually a very sad murder as well in mid-Victorian times. There was a gentleman here. Oh, let me show you this one. That's quite cool. That's an artist that does that, a French artist. Well, he's not actually French. I think he's from Italy, but he lives in France. His name is Clet Abraham. He does those little things on road signs. I think he spent a bit of time in prison in Japan for doing that. It's just a sticker. You can remove it fairly easily. But yeah, it's a nice little addition to some boring signs. Anyway, yes, we had a little murder on the other side of the square. There was a gentleman that lived there with his wife. He was a street artist. He used to perform with his sea dog. He called it a sea dog, a seal. And so he was basically abusing the animal, making shows on the streets. And his wife decided to leave him. His wife, Mary, decided to go with another man. So, of course, he was very disappointed, but, not much you can do. And she was with another guy called William for a little while. And apparently, one day, she's on the street when she sees her husband, but her ex at the time, performing with the seal on the streets. And she was looking at the show and she was like, oh, you know what, I'm still so in love with him. She decided to go back with her husband. So she dumped the other guy, William, and went back with her husband. And one day, William is on the square here where he sees the husband living with the seal. So he knew exactly what home they lived in. So he went inside, he killed Mary and killed himself. And very sadly, the husband, when he heard that, he tried to drown himself. So very sad story. The seal was rescued, so that's good. Anyway, let me show you the building. So it is, they all look the same, but it's this one, number 31. So it is in this building that we believe that Charlie lived at some point as a little boy. He has another address in Kennington where he definitely lived. So this one is a maybe, a very maybe. Anyway, let's go. So yeah, let's talk about his love life. Let's say that he liked his girls young. And when I say girls, I mean girls. His first wife, Mildred Harris, she was 16 when they married. I think they were 15. She was 15 when they met. But then she told him she was pregnant, and so he kind of had to marry her. And then she told him actually she wasn't pregnant, but they had just married, so he went ballistic. But by then she went pregnant for real. So she had the baby, but the baby died. And very soon after he divorced her. So no sympathy whatsoever, no consideration for her whatsoever. So he divorced her. Look, coal cover. So those were for the coal delivery, when they were delivering the coal, they didn't want to get everything dirty, so they would lift that up and drop the coal into a little cellar underneath. Some of them were highly decorated. It was a sign of wealth. Anyway, so that's for his first wife. His second wife, Lita, that's where it gets very dodgy. Lita, when they met, she was actually 8 years old. Nothing happened then, but, not that we know of, hopefully not. But a few years later, when she was 12 years old, he cast her to appear in his movie, The Kid. He cast her to play the flirtatious Angel. She was 12 years old. She looks a little bit older in the movie because she's full of makeup. But she was very young. Let me show you the photo. So screenshot from the flirtatious Angel. So yeah, this is her actual name was Lilita. She actually, would you believe, inspired Lolita from the the novel from what's his name, Vladimir. What's his name? Vladimir Nabokov, I think. Anyway, she's inspired the little Lolita because her name was Lilita, but she went as Lita Gray. And a few years later, they met again. She was 15 by then, and that's when they started to date. Thank you, Kurt. that post here? That's for the horses to hitch themselves as they go through, you know. So yeah, anyway, Lita Grey, she started properly dating him at the age of 15. Now it's not that it was okay at the time. It wasn't. In most of the states, the age of consent was 16, and even before that, even on set, apparently everyone could see that he was grooming her, and they found it a bit dirty. But he was like, "No, don't worry. If she gets pregnant, I'll marry her." And that's exactly what happened. She's 15 years old. She falls pregnant. And her mother went crazy. She was like, "No, you've got to marry her, or I take you down for rape, and I'll ruin your career," you know. So he actually took her to Mexico to marry her. And, well, take the next bit of information with a pinch of salt, because Lita Grey, she actually wrote 2 different biographies. And in the first one, she claimed that her editor had added some crispy details that were not necessarily true. So she published another one later on in life. But apparently when they came back, they saw a train track, and he said to her, "Take your own life," you know. So yeah, horrible man. And then when she's 16, he was telling her how many girls he was having sex with. He claims that he had sex with 2,000 ladies in his life. I mean, he probably did have sex with a lot. I mean, he was the richest, the most well-paid actor in the world at the time. But you don't tell that to your wife, your 16-year-old wife. Apparently, he was then trying to convince her to do group sex as well. When she was still very innocent, and she was clearly not comfortable with the idea, but he was telling her, "Yeah, every married couple does that." So yeah, not very okay. And she was actually leaking information to the press. That's why eventually they agreed on a very high divorce settlement, so he could shush her off. 9 million. I mean, that was huge at the time. At the time, it was the largest divorce settlement in America. And so yeah, anyway, amazing artist in terms of his art, but in terms of his love life. Anyway, the little building across the street here, you may recognize it. If you remember your video clips from the 80s, that was the little corner shop in the video clip from Dexy's Midnight Runners, Come On Aileen. It looks very different today, and it's no longer a corner shop, sadly. Let me show you the photo. So that's what it would have looked like at the time. So, come on, Aileen. I don't have any rhythm, and I'm not allowed to play the music, of course, because of YouTube copyright policies. But yeah, that was where it was filmed. Let's take a look at the letterbox here. I think it's Edward VII. Yeah, hard to tell, but I think it's Edward VII. Anyway, back to Charlie. So after Lita, apparently she's the only wife he didn't mention in his biography. I wonder why. After that, he met another girl, Pauline Goddard. I think she was 22 when she married him. Well, he married her, but she had told her she was 17, so that's probably why. And he actually cast her to appear on The Great Dictator. That's what he was doing, basically, grooming them or casting them in his movies. And Pauline Goddard, she divorced him. The Great Dictator, it is after that movie that the authorities in America, they started to question his vision and his intentions, because that was just before. So he was making fun of Adolf Hitler just before America got into the war. Of course, it was very well received in Britain, but in America, they were like, oh, is it, you know, and also he was accused of having some communist sympathies later on. He ended up being exiled from the US. Luckily, he was already on a boat. He was already on a boat towards Europe, so he didn't actually come back. So yeah, you had Pauline and his last wife, Una Chaplin. When he met her, she was 18. He was 54. So they had 36 years difference. They stayed together for the rest of his life, though. They had 8 kids together. They ended up living mainly in Switzerland. They were between Switzerland and the UK, but mainly in Switzerland. And she, although she was much younger, they seemed to get along very well. There's another Una Chaplin, his granddaughter. You might know her. She plays in Game of Thrones. Talila Stark. She's the one here. So that's Una Chaplin as well, the granddaughter. And he actually died in Switzerland. But what I didn't tell you is that when his mother was struggling, they ended up having to spend a bit of time in the workhouse. So the workhouses, we spoke about them in some of my tours. It was a Victorian institution for the very poor. See the tower there? That's the tower of the Lambeth workhouse. We'll go around to see the front of the building. The Lambeth workhouse had a terrible reputation. The sanity was very bad. The mortality rate was crazy high. It was always high in the workhouses, but this one was crazy high. Charlie came here when he was, I think he was about 7 when he came here. From the age of 7, the mother and the kids used to be separated. And he didn't stay here very long because he was sent into a school outside of the capital. But yeah, quite sad. The workhouses, they were unions of parishes. So this was the Lambeth Union Workhouse. You might know another lady that came and spent some time here, Pauline Nichols. The first of the canonical 5s, the first raper victim. She also lived in the area, and she also spent a bit of time in this very workhouse. Today, it's no longer a workhouse; it is the cinema museum. It's not really open to the public full time. It's more for bookings or school groups and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll show you the main entrance. So Chaplin died in Switzerland in a little place called Le Crozet. It's next to Lausanne. At the age of, I think 77 he was, heart attack. He had already had a heart attack. He was already in a wheelchair, so he died. They buried him, but that's not the end of his story. He died Christmas. 3 months later, Una receives a phone call. It is a gentleman that calls himself Monsieur Rochard. Monsieur Rochard goes, "I've body snatched your husband. I want 600,000 francs." Monsieur Rochard had a very strong Polish accent, so he probably was not a Monsieur Rochard. And apparently Una found it very amusing. She said, "No way, Charlie would find it ridiculous." And she actually started to negotiate the ransom. Of course, she did involve the police. The police set up a trap, but that didn't work. So eventually they had to put surveillance on every single telephone box around Lausanne, and that worked. Eventually they caught the two guilty men. They were 2 car mechanics from Eastern Europe, and they needed some money, so that's why they did that. So this is the front of the workhouse here. And apparently they told the police that the original plan was not to steal the body. they wanted to dig up, remove the coffin, dig a little bit deeper to actually rebury the coffin much deeper. So they could then ask for a ransom, and once they got the money, they could just tell them, oh, actually the body is still there, it's just a bit deeper. But they didn't manage. Apparently, they couldn't actually dip any deeper, so they decided to remove the coffin, and they buried him 10 kilometers away. But then when they tried to give the location to the police, they couldn't remember where they put him. So the police was digging up everywhere. And eventually they did find him. It was a bit hard to recognize him because the coffin was full of water. So it was indeed Chaplin, but he didn't look very good. And they reburied him exactly at the same spot with a bit of concrete over him. So they couldn't, no one could body snatch him again. And yes, so interesting man until the end, even when he's passed away. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions for me before we go. Let me show you my face again. Thank you very much for coming tonight. It's always great to have you all on board. If you want to see a bit more of me, where am I up to? Oh, Thursday, we're going to Waterloo, so literally a few minutes down from here. So we'll talk about Eliza Grimhood again. And next Monday? Yeah, next Monday. I need to get ready for that one. Next Monday, we're heading to Dover. So I'm taking you to Kent. So we'll talk about the dark tales of Dover. Monday the 24th, I think it is. And if any of you dropped me a little tip on PayPal or on Buy Me a Coffee, or right now, thank you very much, Pauline. You very, very much appreciated. I know if it's on PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee, I cannot thank you straight away, but do make sure you know you very, very appreciate it. It is thanks to your generosity that I can spend more time trying to develop new tours and all that. So it's always great to have your support. Thank you, Linda. And do let me know in the chat if you have any questions. Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Natasha. You can't wait for Dover. Yeah, that's cool. Me too. I'm actually looking forward to go down there. I'm going to pick up a large group of travelers from Quebec the next morning. So I have to sleep there because I have to be at the ferry port very early. Dates again for the tours. Linda is asking. So Thursday, this coming Thursday, the 20th, I believe, Waterloo. And Monday, the 24th, Dover. So that's going to be a new area, a completely new tour. So Dover in Kent, the gateway into France, or the gateway into Britain, depending how you see things. Cool. I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to let you go. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. Thanks everyone that dropped me a little tip. And if any of you were completely new to me, hope you'll give me a follow and you'll subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of the next tours. Have a great evening, a great morning, a great lunch, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.